If you grew up in the Northeast or the Midwest, the name Ames probably brings back some memories. It was a staple in so many small towns, that go-to spot for pretty much everything. Today, we're going to dig into the story of how this retail giant went from being a local hero to a major cautionary tale.
And we're not just talking about any old store. Ames was an absolute powerhouse. I mean, think about it. You had Walmart, Kmart, Target, and then you had Ames. They were a massive player. So you have to ask, how does a company that big just disappear from the map? What on earth happened?
Well, to really understand the fall, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. It all started with this really brilliant focus strategy that honestly put Ames on the path to some incredible success.
Now, this is the really clever part. The strategy was just so simple. While all the other big-name retailers were duking it out in the crowded suburbs, Ames went where they weren't. They specifically targeted smaller towns, rural communities, basically serving a whole customer base that the big guys had completely overlooked. This little niche was the absolute bedrock of their early growth.
And you can just see that steady, methodical climb right here. They kicked things off in 1958, literally in an old textile mill. By the late 60s, boom, they're on the American Stock Exchange. A few years later, the big leagues, the New York Stock Exchange. Then, that Big N acquisition in '78, that shows they're getting ambitious, starting to buy up the competition. It was just a super solid, profitable way to build a company.
But that careful, steady growth? Yeah, that was about to change. Ames got a taste for expansion, and in the 1980s, it went on an absolute buying spree that would completely change the company's destiny.
I mean, just look at the speed of this. In '84, they absorb almost 200 King stores. The very next year, G.C. Murphy. And then the monster deal in 1988, swallowing the nearly 400-store Zayre chain. Each step was just bigger and bolder than the last, and it transformed Ames from a regional favorite into a national giant almost overnight.
And this is what all that buying got them. 700 stores. That is a huge number. It put them right up there with the biggest names in the business. From the outside, you'd think Ames was totally unstoppable, a true American success story. But on the inside, the cracks were definitely starting to show.
Right, so that super fast, debt-fueled expansion, it came with a hefty price tag. The party didn't last long, because trying to digest that many new stores, especially a chain as big as Zayre's, was about to give Ames a really severe case of corporate indigestion.
And this slide just lays out the problem perfectly. On paper, the Zayre deal looked amazing. A huge new market, a national presence. But the reality? A mountain of crippling debt. Turning all those Zayre stores into Ames stores was a logistical nightmare. Plus, the Zayre locations were all over the place, making them incredibly hard to manage alongside the core Ames business. So here's the thing. It wasn't just the debt from the acquisition. Ames made another huge mistake. They swapped out the Zayre store credit card for a general Visa card, and their approval policy was, let's just say, very generous. They were handing out credit to just about anyone, which, of course, attracted a ton of high-risk borrowers who ended up defaulting. That combination was just toxic. By 1990, Ames had to file for Chapter 11 and close a staggering 370 stores.
Now, a blow like that would have finished most companies for good, but not Ames. After a really painful restructuring, they actually managed to emerge from bankruptcy, and they were ready for Act 2. And that second act? Well, it would involve one of the biggest gambles in retail history.
Okay, so this was a huge moment. Ames had survived. By 1993, they were actually profitable again. The big question for everyone was, had they learned their lesson? Were they going to go back to that slow, smart growth that worked so well in the beginning? Or were old habits going to die hard?
Well, they didn't just double down, they went all in. In 1998, Ames acquired the Hills department store chain. And as you can see from this chart, this was no small deal. It was another massive expansion that almost doubled their store count and pushed them right back into the big leagues.
And there it is again, the exact same spot they were in before their first collapse. For the second time in a single decade, Ames was the #4 discount retailer in America. It felt like an incredible comeback story. But it was really just a house of cards built on that same old, dangerous foundation of debt.
This time, though, there wasn't going to be a recovery. The Hills acquisition, the deal that was supposed to be their crowning achievement, ended up being the anchor that dragged the whole company under for good.
And you can see from this timeline just how fast it all fell apart.
Only a year after the Hills deal, stores started closing. Then 32 more went, most of them the new Hills locations. By August 2001, they were right back in Chapter 11. And just 1 year after that, it was over. The company announced it was liquidating everything.
The company's own CEO, Joseph Attor, pretty much laid it all out. What he's saying here, in corporate speak, is that sales were down and their suppliers were getting nervous. They started demanding stricter payment terms and slowing down shipments. And for a retailer, if you can't get products on your shelves, it's game over. Their cash just dried up.
So really, it was the perfect storm. You had the crushing debt from buying Hills. Then the credit markets got tight, so there was no financial wiggle room. And all the while, this retail juggernaut, Walmart, was aggressively moving into Ames' home turf in the Northeast. But Walmart played a totally different game, one based on logistics and low prices, not debt. Ames just couldn't compete. They had no choice but to convert to Chapter 7, which means total liquidation. They weren't just restructuring, they were going out of business.
And that really should have been the end of the story, right? A once mighty retailer, gone, leaving nothing but empty buildings and memories. But in a very strange, very modern twist, the ghost of Ames was about to make one last, surprising appearance.
Can you imagine the surprise? In 2022, a website just pops up out of nowhere, amesstores.com. It announced that after 2 whole decades, Ames was coming back, with new stores supposedly opening in the spring of 2023. Could it actually be real?
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like it was all smoke and mirrors. Spring 2023 came and went, and no new stores. The website quietly scrubbed any mention of a specific date. And when journalists tried to investigate, they hit one dead end after another. The parent companies they mentioned, like this Mollynex group, they were phantoms. There was zero evidence any of these people or companies even existed.
And so, the real story of Ames ends not with a comeback, but with a bizarre internet hoax. What's left is a powerful memory for millions of people, for sure, but also a huge business lesson written in bankruptcy filings and empty storefronts. Ambition is great, but growth that's fueled by crushing debt, well, that can turn even the biggest retail giant into a ghost.